happens towards is to write this like write-up, that I'm going to turn in for a grade. And if you scroll down to, it ended up on page 3. This is like his general, like the topics that we're supposed to like ask about.
Right.
I think I've already I basically have incorporated them into, the questions that I asked and the ones that I didn't ask about, the ones that, you already have on your story. So,
okay.
But yeah, that's just like, we don't have to be like, go through the bullet points, but that's just generally what I'm,
I dig it. I like this entrepreneurial interview overview. That's kind of what I was looking for. I was kind of looking for what did they want from you. So this is a lot better. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, ask me anything in any order you want. You can use whatever, whatever's going to get you the A.
Okay. Well, see, I've gotten 100% on everything so far. So let's let's do that again. I tried to make it chronological, or at least like somewhat in a sense. So first off, right, we're talking about you, the founder. And one of the things that you emphasized in I don't remember which one it was, but like that something that was so unique about you as a founder was that you incorporated, you had all of these different things, like you wore all these different hats that most people had only one of them.
Right.
What was that like? Like, what were the key advantages of doing that? Like of being all of those people? Like what? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not at all typical for a startup to have the founder be all of those people. Mm-hmm. Okay. Most startups nowadays are product people. They're techies. All right. And they know how to program, or they know how to build a device or whatever, but they have no clue how to sell it. Mm-hmm. And they have no clue or experience in running a company. It's their first business adventure. But of course, in my case, I had done years of programming and years of running businesses and years of selling. So I had those 3 skills pretty much nailed down. All right. And since I had so much experience selling and running a business, it was pretty easy for me to come up with a product for salespeople and entrepreneurs, because I'd been doing that, so I knew those kinds of people because I am one. I was one, and so the advantage in not having co-founders was that I could have the conversation with the product guy and the sales guy and the entrepreneur guy at light speed. It was inside my head, So it was a wonderful advantage. But of course, it had a disadvantage that if they were separate people, things might have been more documented, regimented, because when you're inside your own head, you kind of skip over the details. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, fine. All right. Mm-hmm. But if they were separate people, let's say if I was the business guy and I had a separate programmer, I might run him differently than I ran myself. Okay. For example, I made it a rule from the very first that I would not do any programming during business hours. Okay. Mm-hmm. I needed to have my salesperson self fully involved in the selling process during business hours. So I could be a programmer on weekends and at night when selling is not possible. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I had to engineer myself to be that kind of differentiated.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does. Would you say, because I guess just a little bit more specifically in there, would you say there were any disadvantages of, like, explicit disadvantages of having all those hats? You mentioned that little one about having the things in your head, but are there any more that come to mind?
Well, yeah, if I had separate people to delegate these tasks to, or let's back up, if I had the money at the time to be able to hire the people to delegate the task to, things probably would have moved a little faster. Mm-hmm. If I had venture capital, we could have moved very fast, all right? But then, of course, I would have wound up with significantly less ownership, okay? Right. So if we took that at a typical scenario of me getting venture capital, maybe I would have had 20% of the stock at exit, which means I would have had to sell it for 5 times as much as I did, okay? Mm-hmm. Which means that maybe it would not have been as saleable, or I wouldn't have gotten as much, all right? Yeah. So tough to say how those things play out, but the driving force was that I was completely broke. Yeah. I couldn't afford a programmer. I had to do the programming myself. I couldn't afford a sales manager. I had to be a sales manager. I couldn't afford a CEO, all right? I was a CEO. So the things that, let's say the gating properties of the adventure were all dictated by not having any money, okay? But at the same time, that fact of not having any money worked to my advantage tremendously, because I had to bootstrap it. I had to make sure we were profitable every step of the way. All right. I couldn't hire in advance of sales. Right. I had to sell. I had to have cash come in before the product left the door. Right. And it had to be profitable in order to pay the rent and people and everything else. So it has been said many times that having money can be a serious disadvantage.
No, that's something that we learned in the class that I just had no concept of, was how like a business can fail even though they're making a profit, but they run out of cash flow. I didn't have that like concept. That's like, that makes a lot of sense how that really does, that matters a lot, that you're bringing in cash and you have to be doing that incrementally. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was the kind of business where you could do that. I mean, it wasn't like an enterprise sale where the sale might be $50,000 or $100,000, but you wouldn't get that for 6 months after the installation and training and everything else, So this is a product that we could get the credit card number immediately before we ship the product to the dealer. All right. We had cash before it left the door. So it was that kind of a product that lent itself to that. Yeah.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned in there was talking about finding points of maximum leverage and devoting your time to that. I guess I wanted to know, like, how were you able to identify those, and like, how were you actually able to focus your attention on those? I'm sure that there were many other things, demanding your attention.
Well, the concept of leverage or maximum leverage and choosing between multiple paths that may or may not produce maximum leverage, all right, and having to think about it ahead of time and plan it out. Strategy, what is the strategy? Well, a lot of the strategy is dictated by the resources that you have available, and we had no cash. So while I had competitors who were VC funded, and they could put big ads in PC Magazine. PC Magazine at the time was like the Bible of the whole industry. All hardware and software was advertised in PC Magazine. And it was a magazine that was about this thick at its biggest. And one page in there would cost $50,000.
Wow.
And one page could get lost because it was all advertising. Right? So you had to have a lot of money to advertise in PC Magazine, but it had a huge distribution, so it could have been worth it. My situation was I didn't have any of that money.
Yep.
All right. So what I had to do is I had to find a way of selling the product that did not rely on advertising. And in my case, it was telemarketing. We would just pick up the phone and call, but we didn't call end users, because if we called end users, that would have been a sale of one copy, maybe. All right. We called VARs, value-added resellers, who would buy multiple copies of the product for inventory, then show it to their customers and probably sell a computer or two with the software. The software would actually drive the sale of the hardware. All right. And many VARs at that time were simply hardware resellers, and software was kind of like an add-on, but it was rare that the software would drive the sale of the hardware. Okay. And so what we were doing, instead of trying to sell end user copies, which is what our competitors were doing by advertising in PC Magazine, which went to VARs as well as end users, we sold directly to the VARs. And we sold a business opportunity. Okay. We were selling the software, but the software really represented a business opportunity for them to use the software to be more productive in their selling efforts because they were using the software. And to show, and because they were using the software, they'd be so much more effective at selling the software, okay? Which was proven by the fact that we were using the software to sell the software.
Yeah.
So it was highly leveraged in that regard. We didn't have to train our people to be separate computer specialists that even know how to operate the computer. We just wanted to hire salespeople, and they've already known how to keep records of their customers, et cetera, and when to follow up. We just offered them a really highly productive way to do that as they went through their selling activities. And their selling activities were to sell the product that they were using. So it was like, oh my God.
That's perfect. That's super smart. Yeah, I love that.
This is so meta, but we didn't have that word then.
But yeah, because I mean, it's leveraging their interest with yours, and they distribute everything that, that's super great, because it's like, it's most concentrated avenues.
Yeah,
for selling the product.
Recursive or something, you know? Yeah. It worked really well.
Yeah. I bet.
Yeah. It was good fun.
Cool. Okay, so that's one point of maximum of like leverage. Do you have any other examples of that? Or like, especially like, I guess removing from the actual company itself and going more towards like how you're spending your time, what you're focused on, like in your day or something like that.
Well, I've already discussed the fact that, programming is a very addictive behavior.
Yes, I have found that this quarter. It's like, what?
Sucks the brain right out of you. It leaves you just a vegetable. You know, you don't do anything else. I mean, I would work for 14 hours straight and not even realize that I haven't eaten, I haven't peed, I haven't, my head's inside the machine, and that's all I'm doing, right?
Yep.
So knowing that that's such an addictive behavior, I had to discipline myself to not do it during hours when I should really be selling, right? Or training my salespeople, or hiring more salespeople, or whatever. Because the whole bottom line here is it's not about the product. It's only about the cash flow, the sales. How fast can you generate cash? Because The faster you can generate cash, the faster you can hire more people to generate more cash. And you've got to keep that cycle going. It's not about the product, right? The only time you really want to improve the product or get involved in programming to build the product is when that activity is going to drive more sales, okay? But a lot of times, me included, technical people, they come up with these genius ideas, or what they think is genius, and they just go down the rabbit hole and program, and at the end, they come up with a product feature nobody asked for, nobody wants, nobody's going to buy the product because of it. You've just wasted weeks, a month, more doing something that is worthless. And I've done that. We're all
that's a good, like, one of the questions. I think you gave me that lesson at one point. Like, the teacher asked a question like that, like, why do so many startups fail? It's like, I was very quick to say, because they make something people don't want. Like, that's really so big, because you can get sucked into that.
Yeah, it's not about the product, and that's the thing that so many people in this day and age of startups. Right? By the way, that word was never used. You know, it wasn't. We weren't a startup. We were just a business. We were just, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know who invented that term startup, but anyway, there were no VCs. You know, there was. We were maybe 3-4 years into it when a guy called up and thought maybe we could use some money. All right, and I talked to him for a little bit, but it was like they wanted reports, they wanted this, they wanted feedback from customers, they wanted all this stuff. And I was like, hey, I don't have time to deal with what you want. I need to be selling. So go away, keep your money. I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
So, you know, the only time you get money is when you don't need money. And I think that's what they saw, was that I was growing just fine. Thank you very much. Anyway,
they wanted to get into it. They wanted their equity as soon as possible.
Yeah. And that's kind of the lesson for people in startups today. They go out and they try to raise money first on the story of what could happen, and they give up all kinds of equity because the risk is so great. But once you're bootstrapping and raising and creating cash, and more so month after month, and your trend line keeps going up, that hockey stick, you don't need money, but everybody wants to give you money to do more and more, scale it even more. All right. And that's kind of where you get yourself in trouble. Yeah. Yeah.
I was surprised recently. I looked, like, there's this app that I use like a lot, and it's got a lot of users. And I wanted to, like, you know, I always like look, okay, who founded it? What's the story? And I see the guy, and I look, like, you know, it says his net worth is like 1.2 million or something like that. When this is an app that, like, you know, 1 billion people use. You know, he should be so much more. But
well, see, that's a different thing. Nowadays, the software is free.
That's
and
true.
you have to get your revenue some other way. Back then, there was no free software. There wasn't any internet. All right, so there wasn't any you know, number of users, or each user going to be worth $8 or whatever, or like Facebook down the road. Okay, you had to be making money right now because we weren't financed by VCs. We didn't have the cash. We had to make money now. And nowadays, it's all about subscriptions. All right, annual recurring revenue or monthly recurring revenue.
Yeah.
Back then, there was no subscriptions. It was all, you know, you sell a product one time, that's it, case closed. All right. So it was a whole different environment. You had to focus on the cash big time. Nowadays, nobody really cares about the cash. We'll figure that out down the road. Here, take some more money.
Do you think that that's a mistake, or that's just the new model that's, like, works?
So many times it's a mistake. It is a model, But remember, that model is driven by VCs.
Mhm.
What they want to do is they want to ride on the coattails of some genius inventor that comes up with this product. And what they're trying to do is get the guy to scale as quickly as possible. And, you know, that just cuts way into the founder's equity. And the founder winds up running the business according to the VCs. VCs want to get out quickly, regardless of how much it's worth to the founder. Okay.
And the best way to get out quickly is if they scale really, really, really fast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't really care how much the founder gets. And many times the VCs will exit early because they don't see this thing scaling to a unicorn stage. They'll exit quickly. And because of the way they write some of these agreements, the founder will get nothing because the VCs have a preference.
Yeah, preferred stock.
Liquidation preferences. And the founder winds up with peanuts or nothing, right? Because the VCs are in control. And the founder signed an agreement that was stupid, but he didn't know any better. He just said, oh, we're getting millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's a deal with the devil.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to keep in mind, right? Like what's the price tag? What are the actual incentives that go into you getting this money? Go into like these people wanting to give you money. There's always strings attached.
See, that's why when I work with CEOs of startups,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and I never take stock. And the reason why I don't take stock is because if I would take stock, it would put me in the same category as a VC. My responsibility as a advisor to CEOs of startups is to represent the CEO and what he wants and have him understand some of the problems in going to bed with VCs before they even get there. All right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's an aside.
That's good. Right? So you extract that. You don't have that conflict of interest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't want it. I think it's counterproductive.
Yeah. That makes sense. Cool. Okay. Let's see. Moving on. So you kind of already mentioned this, so we don't have to spend too much time on that. But right, you got your first $5,000 from, was it Coffee Ambassadors, right?
Yeah. Now that wasn't really an investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. It was a consulting gig.
Yeah. I had an idea for the kind of product that I thought might be saleable. And I pitched him on the fact that he could use this in his company. Mm-hmm. And that it was going to cost him $5,000 for me to write it. But the caveat was that I would own it.
Yeah.
And he, in exchange for that, would get free updates forever. Because if I would continue to sell it, then the more I would sell it to different people, they'd want different features, and he would get the benefit of all these new features, no cost.
Yeah. There's really no value in exclusivity in software.
Right. And I've been working with the guy for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Before that, all right, I sold him his first computer and et cetera. So he knew me. We had a good working relationship. He knew that I could deliver it. Okay. So I don't know what the real deal was. I don't know that he gave me a check for $5,000. It might have been a little bit now and a little bit later and more of a delivery or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it really just paid for my time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how you got your MVP, I guess. And then did you just you just generated cash flow, right? That was the seed to keep, to start the company. You didn't get founding anywhere. You didn't lose any equity getting money from people. You just
No.
were seeking that cash flow.
I kept 100% of the equity right through the sale of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did 100% equity. That's really cool.
Yeah. It's very cool when it comes to payday time.
Yeah.
But again, you know, it wasn't like I was trying to keep it, because I looked at equity in my startup as something that I didn't really want to sell, not because I wanted to hold on to it, because I almost thought it was unethical, or from the standpoint of trying to convince somebody that this is going to go through the moon and all the rest of that stuff. No, I didn't believe it myself. Okay. So I wasn't about to try to convince other people that this was some rocket ship ride. When I first started it, I was coming off a year of bankruptcy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
From having started another company where I really did feel that this was a rocket ship ride to the moon. All right. I was totally convinced of it. All right. I don't know whether you know that story, but the point was that I invented this service that was pretty much the internet that came 15 years later.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I just went for it big time. Okay. And I got an investor, and millions were invested, and the whole thing crashed for bunch of reasons. But anyway, I walked away from it because I only had 16% of it after having gotten a VC involved and a couple other people. I had too little to be concerned about, right? Then I got my ego involved, and, you know, I was young and hot-headed, and I made a mistake. But in any case, so coming off of that adventure with that vibe, all I really wanted to do, which I did for the 2 years before I wrote TeleMagic, was I just wanted to keep my head down, low profile, be able to pay my rent, pay my bills, do good work for other people. I wanted to be so zen, no ego, nothing. All right. All I wanted to do was just help other people, do good work for them. And when I first came up with the product, I sold it to Sean, of course, but from that point on, I only looked at the product as something that I could show other people and say, I can sell you this product, but I know it's probably not what you want precisely, but I can make programming improvements to it so that you do have what you want. I was thinking that I would sell this as a prototype for what they really would want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I was selling myself as a hired gunslinger programmer kind of guy. All right. Mm-hmm. I don't care what machine, I don't care what software, I can do it all. All right. I was just trying to help people do what they needed done, but without any ego, without any delusions of grandeur. Okay. I just wanted to be a low profile guy. So and that's the way it was. I sold it to Sean. Now, almost immediately, I would show this to friends, and they'd say, "Oh, I could use that." Boom, and I just gave it to them because they were close friends, all right? And they'd start running their business, and I'd be selling like crazy. And so I thought to myself, "Hey, I can probably sell this the way it is." And I started selling it for $29 a copy.
Mm-hmm.
Because back then software was sold in little baggies, transparent baggies with maybe like one sheet of paper that told you how to start it, all right, and a diskette hanging on a carousel in a hardware store, all right. Mm-hmm. So I sold it for cheap because most software was sold for cheap then, and that went very well. I went to a couple of shows. People bought it like crazy. And so I started kicking up the price. And I went from 29 to 49. We started selling it to dealers at $49 a copy, but you had to buy 3 copies. All right. Money back guarantees. It was like $150 on your credit card. Boom. We could pump them out all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And my first salesperson wasn't even a salesperson. He was a waiter at the local restaurant. All right. I said, what are you doing after your lunch shift? Surfing. Okay. How would you like to make some money? Sure. Boom.
Yep.
Commission only. You know, how can you lose? He was great. He started pumping them out like crazy. Once he started getting it, hired a second salesperson. Then I hired 2 more. And on and on and on. So, yeah. So what was the question? How did I get off?
Well, I guess it was like, it was something about like how financing worked. But yeah, it's more, you're talking, it's more of an organic growth. Like the company was, there wasn't like.
Hey, it's called bootstrapping. That's the key phrase, bootstrapping. No invested capital whatsoever. I had no savings. I had no credit cards. I had no loans. I had nothing. I had to make money every day, which means that you get pretty creative. All right.
Yeah. And that's, yeah. So that's the next thing with that. Like one of the things that I learned in this class that I didn't understand before was how important it is to be very, very on top of finances. Like really.
That's another thing that I had going for me. And that was kind of part of the secret sauce of the 3 that I did have going for me of sales and technical and entrepreneur, was the fact that I had an accounting degree. Mm-hmm. All right. So I knew books, financial statements. I know how profit was calculated, you know, all the rest of that stuff. So I had that in my DNA. Mm-hmm. All right. And I knew that I didn't want to be doing that kind of stuff. So I delegated it all to a local CPA who had bookkeepers that would just compile all the numbers. But I knew enough to know whether they were right or not. Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's a time-consuming thing. Delegate. It's not fun, but you were able to know that they were doing it right.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Again, it was like a, you know, that phrase, perfect storm of multiple capabilities or talents all in one place at one time with nobody to argue with. Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't have to convince a co-founder that my idea was better than his idea. All right. I just did it.
Yeah. Couldn't that also backfire though?
Well, yes, of course, because, you know, I would get myself in a position where I had this brainstorm at 2 o'clock in the morning and sat down to program it, which I shouldn't have done because I should have been selling it first thing in the morning. I shouldn't have programmed all night and all the next day and all the weekend, you know, to come up with this feature that nobody ever used. All right? But if I had a co-founder and, you know, I wouldn't have been the programmer, it would have been him. And I would have talked to him about this feature that I had an idea for, and it would have been scheduled in the rotation of programming time available, and, you know, I had a value proposition for it. You know, it would have been much more structured. Mm-hmm. But so yeah, the lack of structure can be a curse and it can be a blessing.
Right. So what I'm getting, it's like you could be more efficient with your decision making if you're not running it by someone, but you can make worse decisions when you're not running it by someone.
Absolutely.
So that's the trade-off.
Absolutely. Yeah. But then again, you know, it's like Jeff Bezos's big revelation is to make decisions quickly. Mm-hmm. The faster you make a decision, even if it's wrong, the better off. Because the faster you make a decision, faster you're going to learn that it's wrong, the faster you can reverse that decision. All right?
Yeah.
So making decisions quickly is kind of it's possible when you're the only guy making the decisions. But again, some people get stuck inside their head and, paralysis by analysis.
Mm-hmm.
They got all these things going through their head and they just can't make a decision. Well, okay, game over.
Yep.
You've got competitors that are making decisions faster than you.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I need to focus on in my decision making. I like my information and getting out of that. I've started, you've been saying it for long enough that I've applied that tactic, right? Just making the decision quickly and moving on. Is this decision a two-way door? Yes, fast. I've definitely gotten a lot better at that, but my inclination is against that. So it's been a really fun time, noticing when it's happening and really stepping back and making the decisions the Jeff Bezos way.
Your voice is coming through very broken up, and I'm just wondering if that's a function of maybe your battery's dying or something, or.
Let me try something. How about that?
Start talking.
Texting. How
More.
about that?
It sounds better. Yeah. Try more.
Okay. Talking.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, better. Yeah.
So what did you miss anything?
No.
Okay.
No, I
cool.
just, Go ahead.
But yeah, it's a fun thing because I don't think it's right. It's not a I'm of the opinion that just about everything can be cultivated as a skill. Some things you're like, you grew up with parents who are very analytical, and that works in the realms that they are, and you pass it down and you're trying to apply that analytic lens to an area that it shouldn't be applied to.
Yeah.
So, but right, taking that, and I think that it's as long as you know the problem and are very much invested in fixing it and figuring out what how to make decisions better. I think that's all you really need.
Well, it's like, let's say the programmer, he's got an ego. He wants to build something that is a tribute to his intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He wants to show how clever he is. And what we've learned over the last 40, 50 years of programming is that the best software is written by the fewest number of people on the team, okay? Now, the fewest number of people on the team for programming is one. And that's why I was lucky to be that person, okay? But at the same time, you have to completely remove your ego from the product. I'm not there, and this is where the salesperson in me overrode the programmer, is that the program wants to show how clever he has built this thing, but the salesperson realizes that the only thing it's about is how easy it is for the user to be productive with the product.
Mm-hmm.
All right, which is almost the reverse of what the programmer is trying to show, how clever he is. He's used this feature and this feature and this feature and, all this stuff. The salesperson wants almost the fewest number of features that'll get the job done because he doesn't want it to be complex. He wants it to be so intuitive, so easy to use that people love it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He doesn't want people to try to figure it out or have to be trained into something or be skilled at anything. It should be just dirt simple to use. So that's kind of the salesperson.
Yeah.
And the salesperson, he doesn't want any bugs. And the programmer doesn't want any bugs. So the programmer will take forever to produce something. He'll test it and test it and test it, make sure it doesn't have any bugs, because if it does, it's going to reflect on him.
Mm-hmm.
The salesperson, he wants to get the thing out there right away, but he doesn't want any bugs, because then customers are going to get pissed off.
Yeah.
But the entrepreneur, he knows that software is always going to have bugs.
Yeah.
He's got to ship it because he's got to get the sales, because he's got to get the cash, because he's got to make payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So these three different personalities all have different priorities that are working against each other all the time, right? And sooner or later, the entrepreneur has to make the decision. The CEO has to call a shot and tell the programmer, well, relax. Yeah.
Now that makes a lot of sense. You have to have the perspectives in the room. You have to have all of them. Like you can't make a good decision when you don't have all the perspectives at the table, because it's very easy to get sucked in to one perspective, because it's shiny.
And these three people might have this difference of opinion that goes on that could go on for weeks or months, and they would bring it up in meeting after meeting and still not come to a conclusion, just drag things out forever.
Mm-hmm.
And they might even run it past their venture capitalists to, blah, 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 just to try to come to a decision and make everybody happy. But when there's only one person, I don't have to worry about making these other people happy. Mm-hmm. What's going to bring the cash in?
Yep.
Yeah. Pretty interesting.
It is.
So, yeah, I felt very fortunate to be in that position. But at the same time, you can go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't talk about that yet.
I think it's a question eventually. But yeah, so next thing is basically just the major hurdles, major pivots. Like what really was the most difficult part of growing the business? And were there any like pivots that you really had to go through to keep yourself on the right course?
Well, the success of any business really is about the people you hire. Mm-hmm. All right, and your ability to train them and manage them and retain them, etc., make them highly productive. And having gone through several startups before this one, it was obvious to me that I needed to delegate as quickly as possible, as much as possible. And one of the first things that had to be delegated, once we started selling, calls would come in like, this doesn't work, or I can't figure this out, or I lost my data, or, right? Mm-hmm. I could not possibly deal with that.
Yep.
That would have driven me into oblivion. I had to hire somebody that would do that. And the first person I hired to do that, I said, look, this is what I want you to do. Someone's going to ring. It's going to be a support call. You have no idea what it's going to be about. And you're going to call. You're going to answer the call. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the question and write it down, and then figure out the answer and write it down. All right. Your job is not just to solve the problem and support the customer, make them feel good, fix it. But your job is to document these questions, these support instances, so that we can get all these questions, not just to your successor, the many people who are going to be answering the phone, when this thing goes big, but to the dealers who will also be getting these questions from the people that they sell the software to. Mm-hmm. So your job isn't just to solve the problem, it's to build the support product.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the concept. That was the...
Did he get it?
Not even a little.
Mhm.
I gave him a week and a half, and I called and said, okay, show me the book. He says, what book? I said, the book I told you about. You're supposed to, He says, well, I didn't do that. But I helped all the customers. I said, okay, I'll give you another shot at it. Another week and a half goes by, still didn't have it. I fired him.
Mhm.
Some people are good at solving problems, but not at all good at expressing themselves in writing.
Yeah.
All right. He was a techie. He liked to solve the problems. He was a problem solver, not a documentarian.
Mhm.
And And some people, like, if I put all this stuff in writing, there goes my job security.
Mm.
They won't need me anymore.
Yeah.
So I hired the next guy, and I told him what happened to the first guy. We got the book right away.
Yep.
So, there's issues of first you got to delegate, then you got to train, then you got to motivate, then you got to retain, and all the rest of that stuff. But it's all people,
Mhm.
right? So the first one was administrative, hiring somebody to do the doing backups. You used to feed diskettes into a machine to back up your hard disk drive, and oh my God, who wants to sit there and do that, right?
Mhm.
So hiring people to do the administrative stuff, answer the phone, keep track of appointments, that sort of thing. And then support and sales. And, the more you can delegate, the faster you stay on top of the pyramid. It's so important to stay on top of the pyramid. Once you get sucked down into the middle of it, you're toast.
Mhm.
All right?
That's the whole working on the business, not in it, right?
Right. And I just couldn't afford to hire a programmer in the middle of this early times, because we would have had to train the programmer. Very difficult to train programmer, especially for a product like that was moving quickly.
Mhm.
So I just did it myself for the first 4 years. I was the only programmer.
Mhm.
All right. And then finally I found a guy who could read my mind. The guy was awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome. So it was like a
So
no-brainer.
you said it was 4 years of being doing the programming yourself. Did you already have?
Yeah.
Did you have other people? Had you already hired sales? Had you already hired other people?
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Right away. I mean, right away.
How big was your company before you hired a programmer?
Oh, gee, probably maybe 30 people, 25, 30 people, something like that.
Wow. Okay, so that's hugely sales focused.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay, that makes sense, right? Because once you. Okay, yeah, I didn't have the sense of that timeline. Some so you were doing your sales during the day, and you were building your company, and you were structured you were being CEO, and then at night you'd be the programmer for the entire company.
If it needed it.
Mhm.
Sometimes I just want to get a pint of Guinness and turn it off.
Yeah.
I don't want to program. Oh my God, that's the last thing I want to do. Right?
Yeah.
But I would have to if a bug showed up, and of course there was always bugs, so I'd have to fix the bugs, and then I'd get ideas and move this over to here, and the craziness of programming.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Cool. So the next question kind of goes in is more the. I think it's really interesting how a company gets structured, how you really make sure that every job that needs to get done gets done, and who reports to who, and how that structure happens, and how you make that structure to be efficient.
Well,
What was your strategy in doing that?
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, you've got certain departments within the company. You've got sales, you've got programming, you've got administrative operations like shipping the product out. Like nowadays, it's all done automatically online via the internet. But in those days, you had packages, that weighed 10 pounds that you had to ship UPS and keep track of, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of administrative and operational stuff in order to get a product out the door. But there was support, a lot of support. So you had to hire a manager of support and manager of sales, manager of administration, that kind of stuff. All right. So you'd always be looking for the employee in that department who showed high intelligence and ambition so that you could promote them into that managerial position. And some of them may have had lots of ambition, but they really didn't have the people skills at that level. All right. So you'd try them and then you'd have to replace them, or demote them back again and hire another manager, whatever. So it's a lot of trial and error. But the strategy is it's all about hiring the managers who are going to manage the people so that I don't have to. All right.
So you're not creating the operations procedures. You're letting someone else do that. Right? Like how does
well, by the time that you hire a manager or elevate someone to be a manager, you've already got that base level of documentation. We had a very clear mantra, you might say, and it was do it, document it, delegate it. All right. First, you have to do it to understand what the product or what the job is, and then you would delegate it. All right, so that you can then you would document it so that you could delegate it, and then you could get yourself out of that position so that you could go up and be a manager of that department or a manager of another department or whatever. But you were stuck in your job forever unless you could document it properly so that it could be delegated. So by the time we got a manager, it was already documented. We started, there were certain basic philosophical foundations of the business that I implemented very early on, simply because I had the experience of having done several startups and done sales and programming and admin and everything else. So, yeah, you know what they say in startups nowadays about vision and mission and purpose, and all these things need to be documented. Well, that's all well and good, but it's the nuts and bolts of the everyday operations of every person in the company that all had to blend together to create this symphony that just sings. Okay.
Yeah.
And without that documentation, you've got 25 people moving in 25 different directions. We had to literally brainwash every person that came into the company. And this started very early. In 1985, which is when the company basically started, there was a book that was released called The E-Myth, and E-Myth stood for Entrepreneurial Myth. And it was a book by Michael Gerber and became a real underground bestseller, and still is to this day. It describes the kind of company that you need to build as a company that's started by a technician who has an entrepreneurial seizure. Like, oh, I can do better than my boss. My boss is an idiot. I'm going to start my own company because I know how to do this stuff. Yep. But then he realizes that he doesn't know how to do payroll. He doesn't know about legal. He doesn't know about taxes. He doesn't know about running a business. He doesn't know any. He knows his job that he had before, but now his boss, instead of being a butthead, his boss is him. Right? Which is horrible. all right, and doomed to failure, and certainly not built for scale. Okay.
Yep.
So that book was very influential. And what I would do to create that corporate culture of understanding what we're doing as a business, not just as a job for you and a job for somebody else in another department, but what we're doing together as a business was completely different than the way most businesses were run at the time. I use this book as our corporate culture. Before I would hire someone, we'd put an ad in the paper and somebody would respond with a resume, and I would send them the book with a letter. Thank you for your resume. We really appreciate your interest in our company. Enclosed is a book that we use in the management of our business, all right? If you're sincerely interested in the job with our company, please read the book. And when you have finished it and you understand it and you still want to work for a company that is this way, please resubmit and we'll have a conversation about what you've read in the book.
Mm-hmm.
They were brainwashed before they ever came in. And the fact is that nobody had ever been treated that way in the history of business. All right. Thank you for your resume. We're not really concerned with that. Read this book first. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Who does that? So when they came in, they knew what was expected. They knew how we thought. All right. That made all the difference. And the other thing we did is that every Monday morning, I had a meeting with all hands in the company. 8 o'clock, I'm there. Everybody else is there. We took a chapter of that book each week, and we discussed it in that all hands meeting, not the whole meeting, but part of it, and how that chapter would apply to each person's department and themselves. You see what I'm saying? So we actively insinuated this philosophy into everybody's job.
Yeah.
And we went through every chapter of the book, and when we reached the end of the book, we start over again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just brainwashing.
That's how you keep people just on the same wavelength. Yeah.
Exactly. It's all about the language. Remember, any person that you hire in your business has either experience from some other business or no experience at all. And they come into your business speaking a completely different language than you want them to speak.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Your job is to get everybody speaking the same language. Imagine trying to run a business where sales spoke French and programming spoke Estonian, and you know, on and on and on. It'd be bedlam, all right? Tower of Babel. The idea is to get everybody singing the same music,
mm-hmm.
all right? And once you do that, it's wonderful, just wonderful.
Yeah, you know, I just read Influence by Cialdini.
What a beautiful book! What a beautiful book!
It's so good. It's so good. I have like 2 pages of notes. And he actually the reason I read it now is he just came out with a new principle, like a new edition with an entirely new principle.
Good. Good.
Yeah, and the new principle is unity, right? Bringing people together, and how you do that, and how important that is towards influencing them towards what you want to do. So yeah, that's what you're doing with the book.
Language and a belief system. Yeah, they all have to believe in the dream. They all have to know why they're there, what their position is in the grand scheme of things, and how they relate to other people in the grand scheme. It's so much about the story. It's so much about the dream. All right, you can't have people just going through a simple job. All right, that goes nowhere. They have to believe in the dream. All right. And by the way, that book, Influence by Cialdini, is a favorite of Charlie Munger.
Yeah,
it's one of his favorite books. Yeah, great.
Huh. That's what got me into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I actually recommended that to you. I'm not sure.
I think you
Okay.
probably, yeah, I think because like I got the recommendation from like at least like 4 different people who was like, oh, I would take your your recommendation, on itself, but I got it from 4 people, and I was like, okay,
That tells
yeah,
you
this
something.
is a book I need to read.
Yeah, yeah.
But I decided to, because I got the recommendations a while ago, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait for the new edition.
That's one of those foundational books
Mm-hmm.
that you could read over and over and over again, kind of like How to Win Friends and Influence People,
Yep.
Law of Success, Influence. The other one is Persuasion. The other is the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. And, there's just a bunch of them that are just so basic, so cleanly written, and so powerful that if you get these basics, you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof.
Yeah, I don't know that. So that was Persuasion.
Yes.
And 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing.
Immutable Laws of Marketing. Yeah.
Because I'm realizing, like, I don't know, I'm good at technical stuff. I'm actually like, right, I can do that brain thing that, talking about chemistry and biology, and I can explain that stuff to people who don't even get it.
Right.
But right, like at the end of the day, I don't want to be the guy who's the best at technical stuff. I don't
exactly.
Yeah, I honestly my dad is super good at that stuff. My mom was super good at that stuff. Like, it's in my blood. I could be, if I focused, I could be the nerd behind the computer and be good at it. But it'd be a waste. I really do think that it would be a waste, and that I can do so much more and leverage myself by focusing, right, doing this stuff in school and learning the technical things, but on my own time learning all of this people influence, the basic worldly wisdom of how people work, because everything has to do with people. Everything.
Absolutely. And the other thing about being technically qualified is that it's not long before what you know is obsolete, because there's some guy getting out of college now, and you're 6 years out of college. He's learning the good stuff.
It's a little different with it's a little different with engineering, when because the thing is all the no one's learning the good stuff in school. Everyone has to go to their job to learn what they really need. Software, it's much more right, you're learning the things and then it's instantly obsolete. But from what I've seen in this, but the schools are generally really slow to catch up to the kind of things that is really, really needed in industry.
Right.
So I'm not even gonna walk me and my classmates are not gonna walk into our job knowing exactly what we're gonna be needing to learn on the job from day one.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to get out of that base level very quickly. Yeah. Because there's always going to be new fresh blood that's cheaper.
Yes, who's going to be able to do that learning just as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a little divergent from the interview, but okay. So yeah, let's go into we already did structure the people. We already did the culture. The thing we skipped was, what was your least favorite part of growing the company? What just rubbed you the wrong way and just made things much harder to do?
People is the answer, but people is also the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And people can be such a joyful experience when it works right, but at other times it's such a soul-crushing disappointment that it's just unbearable, right? I had one of our salespeople and one of our guys in shipping work in collusion to keep the company from ever getting the guy's sales. He would sell it to a dealer. He would sell a product to a dealer and have at a big discount, not our price, and have the dealer send the money to his home, the salesperson's home. And then he'd split that with the guy in shipping who would ship it and not record it. You know, and here I am, I'm singing my soul out, what a great thing we got, and wow, you guys are so great, and I really appreciate blah, 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 you know, all the rest of it. And they're stealing you blind. Well, obviously they're fired immediately and blah, blah, blah. Human beings are just so damn human, you know? We had one girl start a lawsuit because she walked past a CFO and one of her salespeople having a conversation, and the CFO was telling a dirty joke to the salesperson, and she happened to walk past and hear overheard something. So she initiates a lawsuit. Give me a break, you know?
What happened? Like,
oh, of course it was dismissed or whatever. But the point is, you have to go through this stuff, right? And in those days, I could just fire the person. You know, nowadays you have to, you have to go to the Supreme Court in order to fire somebody or whatever. But you know, I mean, it's even more litigious now. But yeah, there's some real disappointments in people, but at the same time, others are extraordinary success stories. And, you know, I'm still friends with these people today, 30 years later, because they were just so excellent, extraordinary. I hired one person to be a salesperson who had no experience whatsoever, and certainly no experience with computers or software. And she turned out to be our best salesperson almost immediately. All right.
Yeah.
And remained number one salesperson the whole time she was there, which was right through the end. All right. And she's still in software sales to this day, not at that company, but you know, she just loves selling on the phone, loves selling software, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, some interesting things can happen, but people, they can be so challenging, so disappointing, so stupid, and yet such geniuses. All right. But from my perspective, the more you can insulate yourself from the day-to-day grinding with people, the better it is for me. So what I did towards the end, last couple of years, I only went into the office on Monday morning for the big rah-rah, you know, this is who we are, what we're doing, this is how it's going, and congratulations to this salesperson, or congratulations to this customer support rep, or here's the bonus checks for this month, or whatever, you know, that kind of thing on Monday mornings. Then I'd go home because we had managers in place to do the various, you know, managing. And I'd have the managers come to my home and we'd have our one-on-one meetings there. But if I was in the office, it was just too stressful. You know, people constantly knocking on the door and what about this, blah, blah, blah. Best thing I could do is get out and force the delegation. All right. And yeah, people they can grind you down, man. You know, they don't work like computers, damn it.
No, and when you're right there, the easiest is to just ask a question. Right? I find myself, I'm a victim of that sometimes, right? Like my dad's super good at fixing like everything, you know, and instead of figuring it out myself, I'm like, oh, he's right there. He can do it better than I can. Let's go talk to him.
Right.
So yeah,
That's what they call delegating up.
Yeah, it's so
You know?
easy. But yeah,
Yeah.
you don't. Mhm.
Yeah, we would never allow that. But at the same time, you're there, they're there, you know. Yeah. I was a much better manager when I worked from home.
And less interference. You're managing the managers instead.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. So let's
And
see.
the ultimate expression of that was that I tried several times to hire my replacement. I tried to hire my own CEO.
Mhm.
All right. Because again, dealing with support and management, support and sales and admin and programming and all these different departments, marketing, etc., is still very, very time consuming and stressful.
Yep.
Okay. Creating ads, we didn't have a marketing department, so I was kind of the guy, right? Making investments, hiring people, recruiting, interviewing, all that stuff was still very, very time consuming. So I wanted to hire a CEO to replace me,
Mhm.
right? And who could replace me, really, all right? But I tried. And one of the guys I tried to hire was our biggest customer. He was so in love with the software. He thought it was the best thing ever. He had 100 people in his company using my software. And they were all in telemarketing, and they were using it all day, every day. So he believed in this thing, tremendously. And I told him I was looking for a CEO. He says, I said, fine, come on. And he was only there for like 2 weeks before he wanted to buy the company. And I said, well, the job is to be CEO, not buy the company. He says, yeah, but I can't. I have to buy this company. I said, all right, how much are you going to give me? He said, $2 million. I said, it's nowhere near enough. You can't buy the company for $2 million. And he spent all his time trying to convince me to sell the company to him for $2 million. I said, no. So I had to fire my own CEO.
Not because he was bad, because he liked it too much.
Yeah, you like it too much. I said, this is crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with another guy. But hey, so I stuck it out. And
how big was the company at that point? How many people?
Oh, probably 50, 60, maybe. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We had 70. When I sold the company, we had 70 people. Yeah, it was big enough. When it's big enough. I'm real good at beginnings. I love the beginning of a love affair. I love the beginning of a new relationship. I love selling something. All right. I just don't like the day in, day out stuff. All right. Lost my train of thought. You've been there too long. That was my train of thought. When you see somebody walking down the aisle in your company, and they act like that they belong there, but you don't know who they are. It's like, do you work here? I own the place. Do you work here?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, this, how does that happen? It had to happen sooner or later.
Yep.
It has to happen sooner or later, of course. Mm-hmm. But when it does happen, it really hits you. So, yeah, it's kind of time to get out.
And that's how. So, I guess I can ask the other questions later. So that means like so that's kind of bringing us towards the actual like selling of the company. What were the like events that I know you said that you had like a ball of stress in your stomach that you thought was a tumor, just because it was so much stress going on. Were there any like specific events, like what really led up to that?
Well, I think I mentioned the fact that it's not a subscription business. You don't have a certain base of income coming in that you can rely on. All right, we're selling to VARs who buy the product, so that they can sell the product. Now, VARs, by their very nature, are a weird breed in that they're kind of basically techies. They like computers, they like software, they like being the answer guy, and they would sell a copy of the software and a computer to go with it, and then they'd go out and train the people at the customer's office and do special programming. And all this would take an undefined amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't count on a VAR selling one copy a week. He might sell a copy and go 3 months working to install it and doing other stuff for the customer, and then realize at the end of 3 months that, oh my God, I should sell something else. So the reliability of the income stream was pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you'd grow, the more the expenses grew. And at one point, it was like the payroll alone was $50,000 a week.
Wow.
And that was back in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
early 90s. Now it's like, I don't know, what, double, triple that, something.
Mm-hmm.
So, and without a base of recurring revenue, you had to sell, somebody had to sell at least $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a week just to pay the payroll.
Yep.
And the rent, all right? And when it gets to be Wednesday afternoon and you still have bupkis sales on the board,
that is way more stressful than a subscription model. Now I see why everyone wants that.
Exactly. And that's why VCs want it, because it reduces the risk, all right? So this gets to be very stressful, all right? You've got to figure out, how are you going to create such a huge amount of money in a couple of days? All right, in a couple of days. How is that impossible? Right?
Yeah.
So I'm getting a weird sundog in my face here. Let me get this out of here. There you go. That's better, I think. All right.
That's just, yeah. Now I can really see the predicament there. That sounds like, because no matter what, you're never set. You always have to hit this goal, and the target keeps getting bigger. And most of the people you've already sold to who wanted it. So the more you grow, the less people there are to sell to. That's a whole thing.
It's the treadmill, the rat race.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it never ends. Okay. And to go from, even if I could have invented the subscription model, imagine trying to go from a product sales model to a subscription model. You'd lose all that revenue, all right, while you're waiting for the revenue to catch up through the subscription model. All right. So you're going to kill yourself by transferring from one model to another. All right. So you're dead no matter which way, unless you just keep hammering sales,
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an interesting experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I see what would be stressful enough to want to divulge. So yeah, when it was time to sell, you talked about you contacted some people. How hard was that? Like, how did that go? I know you have that negotiation story, and that was really cool. But like, what was it like to sell a company?
Well, I likened it to, first of all, the process takes forever. I mean, you just figure it's going to take about a year, if it happens at all. And most attempts to try to sell a business, it seems like you're going to sell it, and then it just falls apart at some point. And typically it falls apart at the last possible moment, which is insanity. So you set off on this impossible journey, knowing that it's most likely going to not happen, but you have to do it anyway. All right. And at the same time, you realize that in order to sell the company, somebody wants to buy this hockey stick sales model that you're going. So you cannot take your eye off the ball. That curve has to keep going, right?
Oh yeah.
Must. Otherwise, they're out of there. And at the same time, while that's a full-time job, keeping that going, keeping the wheels on and the curve going up, at the same time, you've got this other completely full-time job of selling the company. All right. Dealing with the broker and the value proposition and getting all the paperwork and straightened out and the agreements straightened out and all the rest of the stuff, all of the administrative debt that you haven't done, like employee agreements and all the rest of that stuff, and getting them all, all the paperwork has to be resolved for when you finally do find the prospect to buy the company. They're going to come in and do the due diligence. So all that stuff has to be squared away. And you need a broker to tell you what you need to do. All right. So
that sucks. So so what are the normal options? Like how do businesses usually, okay, so right. The IPO, that's like the biggest way people cash out. You sell the business, which apparently is very hard. Or what? I mean, I guess you transfer it, but that's like basically selling, like, or it fails. Like, are those the three options?
IPO, sell the company,
die.
What, die?
Yeah, the company dies.
Well, there's other options. You could do an employee stock option purchase agreement. You could do that sort of stuff, but I didn't want to get involved in there. I mean, I was convinced that I was dying of this basketball growing in my gut, and I just wanted to get the hell out of there. My approach was I was either going to sell the company or walk away from it. All right. I mean, seriously. I mean, I've walked away from companies before.
My mom is calling me.
Yeah. We'll edit that part out.
Alrighty, I have 15 minutes until French pork tenderloin.
Okay.
But I think that's actually at a good. We're right on target for that.
Okay.
So okay. There are other options to cash out of a business than those three.
Well, there are certainly lesser used, lesser known, etc. But the point being that my only option, my only focus was not to become rich or wealthy or turning it into liquidity as much as it was that this is my health at stake. At the time I was 50 years old. Now, I was still relatively healthy other than the fact that I had this massive tumor growing in my gut from stress. All right. But at the same time, I'm 50 years old, man. It's not like I'm some 22-year-old startup guy, right? So, yeah, I needed a vacation. Remember that movie, The Terminator?
Everyone's talked about it. I've never gotten around to watching it.
Well, he's a robot from outer space or the future or whatever. And he comes back and he's fighting all the bad guys, and his face is ripped off and his arm is ripped off. And, and he's just in terrible, terrible shape, but he's still alive. And his big line at that point is, I need a vacation. That's the way I was. I needed a vacation, right? And so yeah.
Okay, so
I needed a rest.
that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I guess because that kind of okay, we only got 15 minutes. Let's go into so you said that there really isn't much of a there aren't really anything lessons you wish you knew before you began the company because the way things turned out was where it needed to be. But I guess I feel like there's always, outcomes don't always, mean that you couldn't do it better.
If one thing that enters my mind, meditation.
Mm-hmm.
If I was into meditation and yoga, regular exercise at that point, I probably would not have been so stressed to the point where I would have to sell the company to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I've noticed in my own life, just in the last couple of years that I've been meditating, my whole demeanor has changed so much.
Yep.
All right. Because of that. All right. I'm a calmer, more thoughtful, more compassionate, whatever individual that I was not at all
Mm-hmm.
when I was running that business. All right.
Yep.
I was a man on fire. Okay. And maybe that's what it needed at the time, but at the same time, I think you can wear both those hats of,
That's a really good lesson. Yeah. I mean, my own life, I found that I'm very lucky to have found that out at 20 or 19. But yeah, so I know what you mean there. It's like, I could be like all my friends who are not engineering majors, and they're like, you're the happiest engineer I've ever met. Like engineering student, because all of us are miserable. We're all miserable, except me. I'm not miserable because I figured it out, or at least to some extent, of how not to be hating myself while I'm doing the school stuff.
Yeah, nobody taught life lessons back then.
Mm-hmm.
You were just supposed to get a job at a big company and just stay there for the rest of your life. Nobody started businesses. That was crazy, starting businesses. All right. So, those things didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we?
Let's see. So next thing is advisors. How did that? So how did that go?
Well, we talked about the advantages and disadvantages of being a solo operator.
Yep.
And the disadvantages certainly are obvious. All right. And one of them is maybe lack of focus. And so what I did was I recruited a board of advisors for the sole purpose of selling the company.
Mm-hmm.
And we would meet in secret, off-site, and discuss the issues of selling the company and the progress, et cetera, et cetera. When I first started the company, I was presented with an opportunity to have a board of advisors that most people would have killed for. Right? One of the first people that saw the software was a fellow by the name of Bill Otterson, who was a very extraordinary entrepreneur here in San Diego and started the UCSD Connect program, which was a free accelerator, whatever, for startups here in San Diego. And he called me up and he said he saw the software. His son showed it to him and he saw the software and he thought it was the greatest software he's ever seen in his life. Now, Bill Otterson was an ex-IBM salesman, and so was I, and we had a lot in common. He was a cancer survivor, and so was I, and we had a lot in common. He just loved this software. And he said, Michael, I want to be on your board of advisors. And I said, Bill, that would just be so wonderful. I mean, who could ask for a better person to be an advisor for this company? What's that going to cost me, Bill? And he said, oh, 20%. I said, 20%? Seriously? You want 20% of my business? Which you have already said is like, you know, a rocket ship. No. and it was just too expensive. All right. And there was no money coming in. He just wanted to be an advisor. Yeah. Just to be an advisor. Right. And, you know, I didn't know the deals at the time. I just knew that was way too much, no matter what he brought to the business. And there was no promise to bring anything. He just wanted to be an advisor. And I said, no.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, maybe 6 months later, he comes back and he says, I have this guy, a friend of his, Peter Preuss, had just sold his software company for mega millions. And he would bring Peter and him on my board. And I said, wow, now, you know, this is huge.
Mm-hmm.
What's that going to cost me? Same, 20%, 2 for 1. I said, hey, no, you're still way too. Yeah. So when I finally decided to sell the company, Bill was the first guy I called. I said, hey, Bill, I'm putting together a board for the sole purpose of selling the company within a year. He says, what are you paying? And I said, 0.25%. He says, okay. You know, he just wanted the action, man. He just knew something's going to happen. We're going to do this thing. And I think I paid him like $1,000 a meeting plus 0.25%.
Uh-huh.
And so he was happy to take it. But the idea is that when you want something massive to happen, something very, very important, you put together a board of advisors, you focus on that like a junkyard dog and don't let up. All right. And that's what we did. But all during the time up to that point, I never had a board of advisors. Mm-hmm. All right. And now, because of my success with it, I always recommend to all startups recruit a board of advisors. Mm-hmm. So important.
So, I guess, is it usual that advisors are asking for 20%? That seems like
no. Of course not. Of course not.
Okay.
Especially today, because we have so much more. We've got Y Combinator coming up with standards, etc.
Yeah.
You know, but then no. And Bill had done some extraordinary deals. I mean, he got 50% of one software company. Mm-hmm. You know, like, wow. If you ask for it and they're hurting enough, maybe you'll get it. I wasn't hurting.
That makes sense. All right. Well, unfortunately, it sounds like it's about time for me to head out. I've got a few more minutes.
Hey, we can always do more later. Doesn't matter.
That's true. I unfortunately need to have my nose to the grindstone till the 8th. But I will definitely want to get more, because like I want to get more of this. What's it called? I don't know. The effect where you're being observed and that makes you perform better. I'm in need of some of that.
That's the
like PY
Heisenberg principle or something.
Might be. That might be the study one, but either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking for more of that. So
right.
I will be in contact with you soon. Wish me luck on my finals, and thank you so much for interviewing. I had a really great time.
Me too. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be of service. And you're not going to need luck on your finals. You're going to ace them. You know that.
Yeah, that's true.
But good luck anyway.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.